The Lost Daughters Return. What you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Sometimes life gives you a second chance after decades of waiting, but what if that second chance isn't what it seems? This is the story of Martha and George Anderson, and the day their world turned upside down after 45 years of heartbreak. I first noticed Martha's trembling hands that morning. She was sitting on her porch, like she did every single day, clutching that faded photograph of Sarah, their daughter, who vanished 45 years ago. At 78, Martha's eyes still held that desperate hope that never dimmed. As their neighbor for 20 years, I'd witnessed this daily ritual countless times. George would make coffee in the kitchen, while Martha held that worn photo, whispering silent prayers that floated away on the morning breeze. But that Tuesday was different. The clock showed exactly 11:23 when a white sedan appeared at the end of our quiet street. Martha's hand froze over the photograph. The young woman who stepped out of that car made Martha's breath catch in her throat, blonde hair catching the sunlight, green eyes visible even from the porch. She walked slowly toward the house. Martha made a sound I'll never forget, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. George dropped his coffee cup, the crash of ceramic on tile echoing through the neighborhood. When the young woman reached their front gate, Martha tried to stand, but her knees buckled. George rushed outside, catching his wife while his eyes never left the stranger's face. The woman's lips trembled as she spoke words that hung in the air like a miracle. She said she was Sarah, their daughter, who disappeared 45 years ago. Martha's tears came flooding down while George's face went white as paper. Before we continue with this incredible story, hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable true stories that will touch your heart. The moment the woman pulled an old teddy bear from her bag, Martha collapsed to her knees. This wasn't just any bear, it was the exact one they'd given Sarah for her 3rd birthday. The pink ribbons were still there, faded but intact. Even that patch on the left ear that Martha had sewn after their dog played too rough. George's voice cracked when he asked how she found them. The woman explained she'd been searching for years, only recently discovering she was adopted, trying every possible way to find her real family. Her voice broke with each word, tears streaming down her face matching Martha's own. Martha stood on shaking legs and touched the young woman's face with trembling fingers. Her hands traced the woman's features, like she was trying to memorize every curve, every line, trying to compress 45 years of longing into that single touch. When George wrapped his arms around both of them, all three were sobbing. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, witnessing something they'd only seen in movies. After 45 years, Sarah had come home. Inside the house, Martha immediately rushed to Sarah's old room. Nothing had been touched in 45 years. Pink walls with unicorn stickers, stuffed animals arranged on the shelf, the small bed with its rainbow comforter. Everything waited in perfect preservation. The young woman fell to her knees when she saw it. Her fingers traced the toys, the pictures on the wall, like she was searching for something deep in her memory. Martha pulled out the old photo albums, hands shaking as she turned each page. Sarah's baby pictures, her first steps captured in blurry motion, that 3rd birthday party with the teddy bear. George returned from the kitchen with water, his 81-year-old hands still trembling. He'd dreamed of this moment his entire life, but never believed it would actually happen. The young woman studied each photograph intently, then suddenly pointed at one. It showed a little girl on a red swing at the park, laughing with pure joy. She remembered that swing, she said. The words hit Martha's heart like lightning. After 45 years, their baby had really come home. The woman told them about her adoptive family. Good people, she said, but there was always an emptiness inside her, like a piece of her soul was missing. When she turned 18, she learned the truth. The adoption papers had names, Martha and George Anderson. She'd spent years searching, tracking down old records, following cold trails. Finally, she found one of their former neighbors who pointed her here. Martha absorbed every word like a drowning person gulping air, while George wept silently in his armchair. George suggested a DNA test. Just to be absolutely certain, the young woman agreed immediately, even seemed eager for the scientific confirmation. At the hospital, the doctor saw the elderly couple's desperate hope and expedited the test. Results would come in 3 days. Those 3 days stretched like 3 years for Martha. Each night she slept in Sarah's old room with the young woman beside her. They talked through the decades, filling in 45 years of blank spaces. The woman, who said her adoptive parents called her Rebecca, shared stories of her childhood. Good memories, she assured them, but always with that underlying feeling of not quite belonging. She showed them pictures on her phone. Graduation, college, her job as a teacher. Martha touched the screen with wonder, seeing her daughter's life unfold in digital snapshots. George kept asking about her health, any illnesses, if she was happy. The protective father instinct hadn't faded after 4 decades, but something nagged at Martha. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. When Rebecca smiled, it didn't quite reach her eyes the way Sarah's had. Sarah had a tiny birthmark behind her left ear, shaped like a crescent moon. Martha hadn't mentioned it, waiting to check, but when she looked, smooth skin greeted her. When she asked Rebecca about it, the woman quickly said birthmarks could fade with age. Martha wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it. The DNA results arrived on a Thursday morning. The hospital called, asking them to come in person. Martha's hands shook so badly that George had to help her into the car. Rebecca drove, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. At the hospital, the doctor's face was unreadable as he invited them into his office. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, then delivered the news that would shatter their world. The DNA test was positive. Rebecca was indeed their biological daughter. Martha collapsed into George's arms, sobbing with relief and joy. 45 years of pain evaporated in an instant. Rebecca cried too, but Martha noticed something odd. She seemed almost surprised by her own tears. They drove home in a daze of happiness. The neighbors had decorated the house with welcome home banners. Someone had baked a cake. It was a celebration 45 years in the making. That night, as they sat around the dinner table like a real family for the first time in nearly 5 decades, Rebecca told them more about her search. She'd hired a private investigator, spent thousands of dollars, followed every lead. She showed them documents, old police reports from when Sarah disappeared, newspaper clippings she'd collected. Martha noticed how organized it all was, how methodical. Their Sarah had been a scattered, dreamy child. But people change, Martha told herself. 45 years changes everyone. George pulled out his guitar after dinner, the one he used to play lullabies on. His fingers were stiff with arthritis now, but he managed a few chords. He played Sarah's favorite song, the one about the mockingbird. Rebecca listened politely but didn't sing along. When Martha mentioned it was her favorite, Rebecca quickly said she remembered it, then hummed a few bars. But the melody was wrong. Just slightly off, but wrong nonetheless. Days turned into weeks. Rebecca moved into her old room, though she'd modernized it somewhat. She was attentive, caring, helping with groceries and doctor appointments. The perfect daughter. Too perfect, Martha thought one night, as she watched Rebecca efficiently organize their medication. Sarah had been wonderfully imperfect, messy, loud, always laughing. This woman was controlled, precise, careful. Martha started testing her with little things. She'd mention fake memories, events that never happened, to see if Rebecca would agree. Once, she talked about Sarah's fear of butterflies, completely made up. Sarah had loved butterflies. Rebecca nodded, saying she still felt nervous around them. Another time, Martha mentioned a scar on Sarah's knee from falling off her bike. Sarah never had such a scar. Rebecca rolled up her pants leg, showing a faint mark that looked suspiciously fresh. George noticed Martha's growing unease but dismissed it as anxiety. After 45 years, of course, things would feel strange. He was too happy to question anything. He had his daughter back. That's all that mattered. He took Rebecca fishing, taught her his card tricks, showed her his workshop. She was a quick learner, picking up everything with unusual ease, almost like she'd been coached. One evening, while Rebecca was out getting groceries, Martha went through her things. She felt guilty but couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. In Rebecca's suitcase, hidden under carefully folded clothes, she found a folder. Inside were photos of their house from different angles, notes about their daily routines, detailed information about Sarah's disappearance. But most disturbing were practice signatures. Rebecca had been practicing writing Sarah's name in a child's handwriting. Martha's blood ran cold. She showed George, but he got angry. How could she violate Rebecca's privacy like that? Of course she'd researched them before coming. Anyone would. The signatures could be her trying to connect with her childhood self. Martha wanted to believe him, but her motherly instinct screamed that something was wrong. This woman knew things about Sarah, yes, but only things that were public record, or that they'd mentioned themselves. The breaking point came when Martha found Rebecca on the phone late one night. She was speaking quietly, but Martha heard her say something about the old couple, believing everything and how easy it had been. When Rebecca saw her, she quickly said she was talking to a friend about how wonderful it was to be believed and accepted after so many years of searching. Her explanation was smooth, practiced, too smooth. Martha couldn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about the DNA test. How was it possible? Then she remembered something. The hospital had been very busy that day. Rebecca had handled all the paperwork while they sat in the waiting room, overwhelmed with emotion. She'd been alone with the samples for several minutes when she took them to the lab. Could she have switched them somehow? But with whose DNA? And why would anyone do this? The next morning, Martha suggested they take another DNA test, just to have a backup for their records. Rebecca's face changed for just a second, a flash of panic, before she smiled and agreed. But that afternoon she said she needed to leave for a few days. A work emergency, she claimed, though she'd said she'd taken extended leave. George begged her to stay, but Martha saw relief in the woman's eyes as she packed. After Rebecca left, Martha hired a private investigator with their savings. George was furious, accused her of ruining their second chance at happiness. But Martha knew, a mother always knows. The investigator discovered troubling things. Rebecca's adoptive parents were very much alive, and said she'd never been adopted. She was their biological daughter, born 3 years after Sarah disappeared. She'd become obsessed with missing children cases in college, particularly Sarah's case. The investigator found more. Rebecca had been in therapy for years for something called imposter syndrome, but twisted differently. She wanted to be someone else, to live another life. She'd studied the Anderson family for 2 years, learned everything about them, about Sarah. She'd even had minor plastic surgery to look more like age-progressed photos of Sarah. As for the DNA test, she'd paid a lab technician thousands of dollars to fake the results. When Martha and George confronted Rebecca with the evidence, she didn't deny it. She sat there, calm as could be, and explained that she'd given them what they wanted. She'd given them their daughter back, given them happiness. Wasn't that worth more than the truth? She said she'd felt drawn to their story, to their pain. She wanted to heal them, and in doing so heal herself. She actually seemed to believe she'd done them a favor. George called the police, his hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. Rebecca didn't run. She waited calmly, still insisting she'd done nothing truly wrong. She'd given two grieving parents their daughter back. She'd filled their empty years with joy. The fact that it was a lie seemed irrelevant to her. As the police took her away, she looked back at Martha with genuine confusion, unable to understand why they'd chosen truth over happiness. The house felt emptier than ever after Rebecca left. The brief taste of having Sarah back made her absence even more unbearable. George barely spoke for weeks, aging years in days. Martha found him crying in Sarah's room, holding that teddy bear. He admitted she'd been right all along, but knowing the truth didn't make the pain any easier. If anything, it made it worse. They'd been so close to having their daughter back, even if it was a lie. The story made the news. Other families of missing children reached out, sharing their own stories of false hopes and cruel deceptions. Martha and George discovered they weren't alone in their pain. There were others who'd been targeted by people claiming to be their lost children. Some families had believed the lies for years before discovering the truth. Others, like Martha, had known in their hearts something was wrong. Rebecca was sentenced to 5 years for fraud and identity theft. During the trial, it came out that she'd attempted this before with 2 other families, but had been caught earlier in the process. Martha and George attended every day of the trial, not for revenge but for closure. When Rebecca testified, she spoke about her own childhood trauma, her desperate need to belong somewhere else, to be someone else. Martha felt a strange pity for her, this broken woman who'd tried to steal their daughter's life. After the trial, Martha and George moved to a smaller house. They couldn't bear to stay in the home where they'd waited 45 years for Sarah. The new place had no memories, no ghosts. They kept one photo of Sarah, the real Sarah, on the mantle. The rest they donated to the police, hoping it might help find her someday, though they both knew the truth. Their baby was never coming home. George passed away 6 months later. The doctor said it was his heart, but Martha knew better. It was broken, shattered by hope and despair in equal measure. At his funeral, Martha spoke about their real daughter, the little girl who loved butterflies and sang off-key and left her toys everywhere. She didn't mention Rebecca. That chapter was closed, a cruel footnote in their story of loss. Martha lived another 3 years. She spent them volunteering with families of missing children, sharing her story as a warning. Not everyone who comes to your door claiming to be your lost child is who they say they are. Hope can make you blind. She'd tell them, love can make you foolish, but a mother's instinct, that deep knowing in your bones, that's what you should trust. She died on a Thursday exactly 48 years after Sarah disappeared, still waiting for her real daughter to come home. The truth about what happened to the real Sarah Anderson was never discovered. She remained one of thousands of children who simply vanished, leaving behind broken families and unanswered questions. But Martha's story became a cautionary tale in missing persons communities. The woman who knew something was wrong, who chose painful truth over comfortable lies, who never stopped loving her real daughter even when offered a convincing replacement. Rebecca served 3 years of her sentence before being released on good behavior. She moved across the country, changed her name, and by all accounts, lived a quiet life. But sometimes, investigators reported, she'd be seen at support groups for families of missing children, sitting in the back, listening to their stories, with an intensity that made everyone uncomfortable. Whether she was seeking redemption or looking for her next mark, no one could say for certain. The Anderson house stood empty for years after Martha's death. Neighbors said they could sometimes see a light in Sarah's old room, though the electricity had been disconnected. Others claimed to hear a child laughing in the backyard where Sarah used to play. But these were just stories, the kind people tell about houses touched by tragedy. The real haunting was in the hearts of everyone who'd known Martha and George, who'd witnessed their joy and devastation in equal measure. In the end, this story isn't really about Rebecca or her deception. It's about Martha and George, about the power of hope and the danger of desperation. It's about knowing when something is wrong, even when everything appears right. It's about the strength it takes to reject a beautiful lie in favor of an ugly truth. Most of all, it's about love, the kind that endures for 45 years without wavering, the kind that knows the difference between a stranger and a daughter, the kind that never ever gives up, even when giving up would be so much easier. The last entry in Martha's diary, found after her death, read simply, "Sarah, my real Sarah, wherever you are, we never stopped looking. We never stopped loving. We never stopped waiting. And someone tried to replace you, but no one ever could. You were irreplaceable from the moment you were born. Love, Mom and Dad."